Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out for our AI session today. Before we get going, just a quick show of hands. How many people have been to the summit before? Awesome. And the rest, first-timers? Good. Well, I hope you're having a great day. There's been a lot of really good content, some great speakers, some great breakout sessions, and really hoping that we'll continue that trend. This panel will definitely fulfill that need. I'm Doug Mashkuri, General Manager and Vice President of GovLoop. We're an online community for government professionals with about 300,000 members and create a lot of resources to help government folks do their job better. Thank you for coming out today. We have an all-star panel up here, no pressure now, of experts with really different perspectives and viewpoints on the state of AI and where we're going. But just as a quick level set, we know AI is a game changer for government. We're already seeing it, we're experiencing it. The transformative nature of it has impact on national security, to agriculture, to transportation, to medicine, to so much more, to citizen services. The power is out there, the scale is out there, but there's still so much more that we have to learn as we move down this kind of path to what it really means. There's a lot of opportunities out there with AI. There's a lot of things happening in government, which we'll be talking about today. There's great opportunities for government and industry to be collaborating more, using AI and implementing AI. But there's another side to this. There is us understanding the capabilities to protect ourselves and our citizens from capabilities. We have to protect end users. We have to protect privacy. So there's a balance. There's a balance out there that we're learning it. We don't know all the rules yet. It's happening in real time. We're kind of building the plane while we're flying it, which can be scary. But it allows us to be agile too. So today's panel, if we do our job, you're going to walk out of here with a very good feeling for what's the current state of AI. You're going to understand some of the obstacles and opportunities that are out there. And then we'll hopefully have time to end with kind of what we think is coming next. So by means of introducing our panel, I'm going to have each panelist introduce yourself, your name, where you work, and kind of give us your view of the current state of AI in government from your perspective.
All right, good afternoon. Sharian Swingan, I'm Chief Enterprise Architect, National Science Foundation. NSF is a single mission agency. We promote science research in the nation. We also put a lot of our grants dollars in promoting and advancing research in AI. And also we led the creation of AI strategy for the nation. But I'm coming from the administrative side of our organization. From the CIO shop, IT perspective, we have a vision to intelligence enable our IT systems. So from that angle, we have been creating a couple of AI services to intelligence enable our grants management systems. So I'm here to share some of our experience, take your feedback, and go back, see how we can even further improve on that. So thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Sanjay Gupta. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Small Business Administration. Just by way of background, I started roughly about 3 years ago. I come from the private sector, first time in the federal government, so I'm enjoying and I'm kind of seeing how I can bring some private sector experiences into the federal government. In terms of artificial intelligence, I kind of want to sort of set the context, and I know I've been in many panels and many discussions where if you think about artificial intelligence, there are really two types of users for artificial intelligence. One is consumers, and the other one is producers. So what does that quickly mean? By far and large, in my estimation, the federal government is largely a consumer of artificial intelligence. 90%, 95%, even more than that. And what I mean by the producers are people who create the algorithms behind the artificial intelligence engines. So the reason I bring this up as a context-setting discussion exercise is you have to recognize which user segment you're talking about, right? By and far, from SBA standpoint, I don't think we'll be writing algorithms, but we'll be a consumer of those. So I want to kind of talk mostly from a consumer standpoint, and I'll also share my perspectives from a producer standpoint during the rest of this discussion. But I'm going to set the stage about artificial intelligence. I think by far, 95% plus people are going to be the consumers of artificial intelligence.
Great. Well, good afternoon. I'm Kirk Dukes. I'm the EVP and General Manager for Security Best Practices at that scruffy little nonprofit called the Center for Internet Security. And so, we have two missions. The first mission really is around producing cyber threat intelligence and sharing that with the SLTT community, states, localities, tribal areas, and territories in that regard. The other more powerful mission is really around security best practices, and that means security benchmarks, which really is about configuring commercial products. And then the second piece is around those critical security controls. You may, if you're familiar with SANS Top 20 or the critical security controls, well, they're now honed in the Center for Internet Security. And so from my lens, the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence is really around speeding and automating and taking the human out of the loop when it comes to actually better, effective cyber defense in that regard. So now, before I joined CIS in January 2017, I spent a lifetime at the National Security Agency. And so, yes, I have the gray hair to prove it. To play off what my colleague said is both consumer and producer. At the National Security Agency, they are both. They are both a consumer, and they also, in narrow segments, they are also a producer of artificial intelligence applications and those algorithms with that. While I was at NSA, I was focused primarily on what's now known as cybersecurity. Before that, if you're familiar with terms like information assurance or information security, it really was about the defensive mission. It was about protecting national security information and providing secure communications for senior leadership. I will not talk about the ambassador at the EU and whether or not he should be using his personal cell phone for private conversations. But the point here really was around providing capabilities for the nation to protect its communications for that. And so I am looking forward to having a rich dialogue with you. I am certainly opinionated after 33 years, and so I look forward to your questions. So.
My name is Robert Baxter. I've been with NetApp for about 13 plus years. I'm currently the AI lead for the public sector, focused on trying to make sure that the organization as a whole knows where the industry is going, much like all of us are trying to figure out today. So I'm really focused on learning the things that people are looking for, what we can focus on, and some of those pieces. It sounds really impressive, but it's one of those. It's again trying to learn like everybody else. Like I said, I've been here 13 years, covered everything from DoD, the civilian agencies, things like that. Where I think we are, I think we're kind of at the same place where we were with DevOps. Where do you buy a DevOps? Where do you buy an AI? People don't know what they don't know yet. They're still trying to figure it out while everybody's trying to tell them that they need to do it. I agree very much with what was said earlier. I think most of the U.S. government is going to be a consumer. They're going to want the models that are going to tell them the answers. They're not necessarily going to have the personnel that are going to be able to develop those models. And that's where I think a lot of the industry can help, is making sure they have the people to help develop the models. Universities will be a big part of that, I think, and maybe in getting the industry involved with the universities so that they can help the government. So they have the models that they can use is going to be a key piece. So.
Great. Well, as you see, we have a really strong panel, and we have a lot of good perspectives. So we're going to come out of here a lot smarter today than we came in here. So let's jump into it. I think, speaking of jumping into it, from our panelist perspective, AI can be very daunting, and there's multiple ways you can start, and you're seeing different agencies doing different things. How are agencies getting started? Are they identifying what role they play in it? Are they identifying a project or initiative? So they'll just throw this out to the panel. How are you seeing government entities jumping into the world of AI?
You want me to go first?
Please.
Okay, sure. So in my opinion, I would say anything that we do in NSF, it has to be aligned with our mission objectives. So from our perspective, we get a lot of ideas from the community, research community, to so we have to judge them and then what to make it as a grant or something. So it's a huge burdensome process for the staff. So from that angle, we are introducing intelligence into our merit review systems, our grants management systems, to reduce administrative burden for by augmenting these AI services so that it can help them with some of those decisions that are made within the grants management life cycle in enabling in awarding these grants. So that's, so I would say, whatever we do, it has to be aligned with our mission and the business value. That's number one.
Great. And Sanjay, how about at SBA?
So from our standpoint, if you think about it, we are applying the artificial intelligence domain, if you will, in primarily the cybersecurity arena. And why so? Like my friend here was talking about, that's an area which you're producing a lot of data. And the data is exploding, if you will. And you need some way to be able to harness the data in a meaningful manner. And you have to be rapidly responding to the cyber threats. We all know about that's happening, right? And that's where I'm saying some of the tools we have deployed are inherently using machine learning and artificial intelligence as an embedded feature. And I'll give you just a simple example, which hopefully most of you can relate to some of these capabilities that the tools have. For example, they build a user profile of all individuals based on the usage patterns. So a simple example, let's say I logged into my office this morning at 9 a.m. at the Washington, D.C. office with my credentials. So let's say at 10 a.m., my same credentials are used in LA, California. And we all know I couldn't be in LA, California, and I cannot be in Washington, D.C. in 60 minutes, right? So one of those situations is not correct. So they'll flag an alert, which will say, you know what, improbable travel, somebody should take a look into it. Chances are high that my credentials might have been compromised. That's why it's showing a login from 60 minutes, which is about 4,000 miles apart, right? It's a very simple example, right? But that's kind of the example that the tools today have, and they're building them increasingly. So that's why when I talked about a consumer standpoint, we are all consumers of that. Now, I guess from your standpoint, I think, what do you think about how is the government going to be using artificial intelligence, right? And if you are a service provider, you're a tool provider, or you're building new capabilities, one of the things that I'm seeing from a government standpoint is the fact that the right questions probably are not being asked from a procurement contracting standpoint. Because some of these features become embedded in the tools. You already have, let's say, a subscription for that tool. You keep upgrading because it's a SaaS service, and you don't even know behind the scene there is some artificial intelligence built in. And why this is important is because the model behind it is using some data, and based on some data and patterns, it's making or drawing inferences. Now, the assumption there is the data it is using is, let's just say, accurate and high fidelity and high integrity, right? Now, in this example that I use, it's probably not a situation where the data may not have high integrity or fidelity. So in this case, it probably doesn't make much of an impact. But the example that Chezian was talking about, issuing a grant, for example. We at the SBA also issue loans or underwrite loans for the small businesses, right? Or we offer certification programs for small businesses. And so we're making some decisions. The moment you are involving in a machine learning or a model-based decision-making support system, then you have to worry about the fact that what is the inference engine? What's the basis for that inference engine? Are there inherent biases in there? And are you using the right data sources which are informing this inference engine to make those choices? So again, from your perspective, the takeaway I would say is that you should be thinking about that and having that intelligent conversation with the government counterparts or your prospective customers, informing them how you are building those capabilities, how those tools or models are being built, and what are the factors that are going to influence the outcomes produced by those models.
Kurt, so question for you on that in terms of jumping in. From a security perspective, where does security layer into decision making? What should be considered? When should it be considered? Obviously, security is a big deal in anything we do in government. And I would assume with AI that factors into it. And where should that be factored into it?
Yeah, so I'd tell you, first of all, early and often with security. But, I would also point out, and I think it's seconding what Sanjay was talking about, which is what we have today in the tail end of 2019 is a lot more data than we had a decade ago.
Absolutely.
And so what we don't have yet is the data in a standardized format so that we can then create data sets from which we can then engage model machine learning, from which then we can develop
Drive inferences, yeah.
In that regard. And so the good news is we're getting that data. We still, are lagging a bit in standards around this. But where I see this going really is actually to my earlier comments, which is around getting the human out of the loop. And I realize this is going to be hard for many of your prospective customers, and I'm thinking folks in uniform in that regard. Try to tell a commander that they're not going to be able to make that decision. The machine's going to do it on their behalf. But really around the interest from a cybersecurity or cyber defender's perspective is getting the data sets, creating the machine learning models around that, and then figuring out the algorithms for that. And so this is what, from a Center for Internet Security perspective, what we've been doing is we've been partnering with Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Lab around integrated adaptive cyber defense. And I would say we're still in the crawl, or maybe starting to get into the walk stage with that. And really, it's around creating those playbooks that will then, develop the algorithms to then turn into artificial intelligence for that. And so, getting the standards in place for that. So, from a DoD, which that effort is actually being sponsored by both NSA and by the Department of Homeland Security in that regard. I actually think they've made really good progress, but this is finally going to enable us to get at the same pace, speed of the intruder. Right now, I think the advantage is to the network intruder that they can do what they want, and by the time the defender reviews the logs, or have Perl scripts to automate, at some level the logs, and then try to chase it down, the adversary has already completed their objective. And so there's great hope with this, but I think we need to also focus around some standardization that would help with machine learning that leads to artificial intelligence.
Great. And then, Robert, from your perspective, how is industry helping government jump in?
So I think how are we helping, and where do we need to help? So how are we helping? I mean, I think a lot of it is the breadth of customers that we cover. We can help guide people in their discussions and the things that they're doing. We talk about cybersecurity, and that's since everything's about the data and how it's going to be laid out and whatnot. Cybersecurity is one of those that if you have Splunk logs, that's a standard format that's going to dump everything. It's a very easy thing to get somebody in, have an AI discussion with them, give them an algorithm, and have a success there, and then build on that with some of the other things that they may have in their data centers. Every agency is different, so you've got to really kind of start looking at the different agencies and seeing what data sets they have, what data sets led themselves to the type of workloads that they're looking for to get some sort of real information out of. And we need to show them maybe the different agencies and what they've used, and maybe COTS solutions, maybe AI algorithms that are already out there, and maybe just getting them involved with some of the universities. Like MIT is going to spend, I think they said, $1 billion on an entire new college on just artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of interest there, and I think that's going to be key with a lot of the other discussions as well.
Great. Well, we're gonna snake back now for our next question. We'll start with you. This is a very popular topic. We hear it a lot around a lot of things in transformation, but I think AI, reskilling a workforce. And Kurt, you mentioned it. How do you tell a senior person in uniform that you're not making these decisions? And how do we get our government workforce ready today and then in 10 years? In 10 years we have time, but we're doing this now. So just would love to hear from our panelists. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And any suggestions there? And Robert, we'll start with you.
So getting the people ready, like I said, everybody wants to buy an AI right now. And so I think there's a lot of interest in people getting out there. GTC was just held here in December. They had 1,000 people, roughly more than they did last year. So it's growing 50% year over year, just like the one out in San Francisco. So there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of people trying to get into it. I think a lot of it's going to start with some of the data analysts, and then move from there into some of the other skill sets. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the industry to go out and find some of the experts. Most of them are coming out of college because it's something that's a fairly new thing, so the colleges have programs developed for those. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to entice college people to join their teams and start developing programs to develop these solutions for the government, because the government isn't real sexy to most of the people that are coming out of college. The people you're going to get out of college that are going to come in and join the government are going to be the ones that saw a mission and they thought that mission was interesting. So the DoD and Intel probably have a better chance at getting that than say like the Securities Exchange Commission or GSA or somebody else. A college student's going to look and, why do I want to do that? But you can offer them a company like Lockheed Martin or Booz Allen or Unisys or something else that's very large and has a lot of different things that they're going after. You can bring them in and really get them going and then use that knowledge base across all your customers. And that benefits the government and the contractor.
Thanks. Kurt?
Yeah, so I guess my first advice for the government employee is don't be complacent in your current work role, because it is going to change. And I don't know if some of you remember or not, Mark Andreessen, founded the modern day web browser and Netscape, and now Andreessen Horowitz. But he wrote this op-ed, I don't know, maybe 10 plus years ago about software was going to eat the world. And he's absolutely correct in that. And so when it comes to workforce development, your current skill sets, repetitive skills, where you're used to doing that, automation is going to remove that as a job opportunity for you. So you're going to have to think about constantly adapting to a changing environment. And so you as potentially providing workforce augmentation or capabilities to the government, I think one area where you could help is actually in training, foreseeing where technology is going to take and what those next set of skills are. And so you could actually provide training programs for some of those, that workforce going forward. Absolutely, there's a huge need in this country right now for data scientists. It's in huge demand. I mean, but over time, as those algorithms get refined, again, it's going to be going back to fewer employees managing machines or managing a process. And so right now, the other area that's huge from a cybersecurity perspective is security operations centers and the analysts around that. So think about it, those tier one analysts, right? Automation will take care of that, and artificial intelligence will take care of that. So you better start thinking about those tier 2 and tier 3 analysts and what the skill sets that you'll need going forward with that. But fundamentally, we're in an era of constant change, and I think Mark Andreessen got it right. I can say that now because I've had the liberty of 10 or 15 years to kind of see whether or not he was right. So yeah, he was right, and automation is here. And now that we train off data sets, then we'll create the algorithms, and you'll have artificial intelligence, and it's fundamentally going to change the workforce and the development needs around that workforce.
Great. And then Sanjay, what are you seeing at SBA?
Yeah,
How's
so
your team
again,
getting ready?
workforce is always a challenge. Regardless, you pick any new modern technology, it's a challenge.
Right.
So having said that, I kind of come back to the label that I talked about, consumers and producers. So if you're a producer and you're likely to be a producer of artificial intelligence, yes, that's a very, very unique skill sets, and there's going to be very few people who have the capabilities, the competencies to do that work. So I don't think that's sort of the masses, like I said earlier. In my estimation, that's probably less than 5% of what the broad spectrum of artificial intelligence is. So let me just kind of talk a little bit. Artificial intelligence means many, many things. There are many other terms that go with it. And so if you kind of think about it, and not necessarily this is a linear thing, but automation is sort of the most earliest forms of this spectrum of what's generally called artificial intelligence. So in your terminology, you may have used or heard or talked about or produced a service called RPA, robotic process automation, right? So the automation word, anything around automation, is sort of the entry level into the artificial intelligence world, if you will. So you can say, yes, we are producing, we have a solution, or we have a tool, or we're providing a workforce around that. Then you start moving up that chain, if you will, then you get into machine learning. That's a little advanced stage of automation where you are creating some learning through the repetitive execution of whatever you're executing in an automated fashion, right? And as you advance further, you start getting into deep learning, and that's even more advanced state of that, the artificial intelligence spectrum. And then you get into neural networks, which is even more further advanced level of that. And I'm not quite sure many organizations even across the world today have anything tangible in that space, but you'll hear a lot about it. And so when people use the word artificial intelligence, they could mean any or all of the above. So the reason I'm just sort of sharing that with you all is just be mindful of that and see where your product service offering fits within that continuum so you can have a more intelligent dialogue in terms of where you are placed in this continuum, which is generally called artificial intelligence, right? And that's very helpful because the reason I try to talk about it in the basics for even for my organization is because we hear the term artificial intelligence all the time. And you ask the question and say, what specifically do you mean with it? And then you get the answers of, it's artificial intelligence. And 16 ways of sort of just using the same words, but you say, well, what does it really mean? And then you start getting to parse it. And then you have the dialogue about automation is sort of the entry level of it. So in terms of workforce, I'd say this is a challenge. I think the universities are struggling with it. I think Kurt, you or maybe you mentioned about MIT's putting a significant amount of investment to develop the next schools around that topic. This is going to be a challenge. I was actually part of there was an artificial intelligence summit probably a month ago, 2 months ago at the White House, and this was a topic that came up there as well in terms of the demand for that skill or labor force or workforce is very high. However, the supply is very, very limited. And this is sort of where it gets into areas which is sort of beyond this, probably today's panel's discussion is, the best and the brightest minds in the world may not necessarily exist here in this country, if you will. So again, I don't want to go into that dimension here, but that's only for the producer side of the world. So anyways, that's sort of, hopefully it gives you a little sense of perspective of what it means from a workforce standpoint.
Actually, before I jump to you, one follow-up question. Where's the training happening? Is it inside training? Are you sending people out for training?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is there's not really a formal artificial intelligence career path or training path or curriculum that I've seen yet.
Right.
And that's sort of where I was trying to lay out and say automation, machine learning, deep learning, and neural networks. That's the sort of the spectrum. I think a lot of the people are offering solutions today, to my knowledge, but I don't know anybody who's offering anything which is of substantive nature to say, you take this class and you come back and you'll be able to produce X.
So if there are any training providers out here, we may have found an opportunity.
Yeah.
Shajian, tell us a little about
Sure.
NSF and what you're seeing.
It is a big challenge to upskill workforce. I'm going to begin saying, when you introduce these intelligence-enabled systems, it's very different from traditional IT implementations because you are expecting the end users, the consumers, to trust these systems. So that means they need to have some level of understanding how these algorithms work and how the data the training data sets are used behind the scene. So it is a challenge. So I'm going to speak from NSF perspective. We have been trying two approaches. It actually works for us. The first one, we got data scientists from outside, but we didn't just leave them inside because, you don't want them to be like a disruptor to our workforce. So we created an environment for these data scientists to partner with our business experts, the subject matter, and the IT. So the environment allows them to meet very frequently, at least 2 or 3 times a week. So when they meet, what happens is the new person, the data scientist, who often sits on the business side, not on the IT side. So he or she has an opportunity to learn the business. On the other side, the business person is now trying to understand what data science means, how these algorithms are getting created. So it creates this environment where it stimulates innovation. That's the key there. Once the trigger happens, then things go in the direction where you want it to go. So that's one approach we are trying. It really helps us with shared learning and building teams with respect to data science, and data scientists learning the institutional knowledge and the business people learning data science. The second approach, in any organization, you would have a person who lives on data on a day-to-day basis. So I mean, at least one, and there could be more. So our approach has been taking those people, and you know what, traditionally what they do is they look at like desktop-based applications like Microsoft Excel, or they even have primitive BIs to do their data analysis on a day-to-day basis. So when you go to these people and teach them a couple of lines of Python script, or two sets of R programs, or even like a cosine similarity, or how you translate your words into vectors, they get really energized behind it. And these people are not going to turn into a data scientist overnight, but it's a trigger. And we have seen these people actually getting energized, and they are doing their own data science courses in the evening hours. So this is really helping us. To answer your question on what kind of courses we are looking at upskilling our staff, we have partnership with Udacity. We are trying the MOOC approach,
Yeah.
and it's been piloted, and also we are working with the CIO Council to really try it broader than NSF. It's really working. So we are going to learn the first year how it goes and then potentially expand it further.
And it sounds like what you're saying too is that there's a little bit of silo smashing going on
Right.
here, getting different siloed functions working together up front to build the right widget, whatever this may be, as opposed to building it and saying, hey, what do you guys think, right? And you're seeing success there.
Yep, it's a natural process. We are letting it evolve. So let's see.
Great. So I have a question for you, or I would love you to, in our prep call, you talked a little bit about how you guys are using AI to improve administrative and operational outcomes.
Right.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, NSF is a single mission organization. So we get about 60,000 ideas a year. Each of these ideas are 60 pages in length. It's a PDF document. We have like 7 major portfolio of science, like computer science, biology, mathematical, physical science, education, human resource, social, behavioral, economical science, engineering, and one more, geoscience. So traditionally in the olden days, we used to work on silos. So when these ideas come in, this come on specific solicitation, and the respective program staff takes these ideas, and their job is to read it through, take experts from the industry to look at these ideas, provide feedback, and then make a decision on the award. It's a huge labor-intensive process. So, so that's one thing. The next thing we also saw recently is most of the new ideas that's coming into the foundation are cross-cutting in nature. We're getting an idea that cross-cuts between computer science and biology, like cognitive neural networks. And we also see like, cross-cutting research from engineering to bio, like biotech, right? So when more of these things come in, we were not, the old siloed mode of operations doesn't work anymore. So we need something to solve this problem. So we approached using some of machine learning techniques to see how we can help sort these ideas into groups as the ideas come in, and then also we have to get external people's opinion on these ideas. That's part of our gold standard merit review process. To identify these people outside, it is a huge labor-intensive process. They go to various publishers, they will go to university staff, they look at industry staff to see who can sit on a panel to review these proposals. Now, the algorithm that we have, what it does is as the ideas come in, post-it groups, and then immediately matches the people from outside and recommends these people can sit on your panel. And also, at some point we have conflicts, like some of the panelists could actually be the researchers who submitted the ideas. We want to make sure we don't run into conflicts. So we're using some of the algorithms to check these conflicts. So this is all started like 18 months ago, and we have a huge success within the agency and a lot of administrative burden reductions happening through this process. But we want to evolve even further. We are thinking of more algorithms, like Sanjay was talking about. We want to get into the deep neural space because because we are going to have biases. We are going to have data quality issues, the training, the data training sets issues. So we want multiple algorithms predicting these things, and we want to go into the deep neural space. So I'm open for, like, anybody says they have an algorithm, I'm open to listen to that, no matter whether it's applicable to grants or not.
Awesome.
So anyway, that's what's going on in Foundation.
I appreciate it. It's a great example. So I think our panel is very indicative of our audience today. We have a mix of industry, security experts, government representation, and with this movement going on, collaboration is critical for success. There are things that are in the commercial world that can be applied to government. There's things that we're learning in government that should be applied to commercial. There's the security layer that early and often has to be there. So given our audience today, I would love to just go through the panel and understand, how do you define success early on, or how do we measure success early on? Robert, you and I were talking about this a little earlier. I don't think there's a right answer, to be clear, that there probably isn't right now. But if we all have to work together, the best way to prove that something works is having a metric or some type of measurement that shows we're moving in the right direction. And maybe this isn't a fair question, but I'd love to get from all your different perspectives what you think that might be or could be or potentially should be. I'm going to start with you.
Sure. For me, just one answer, adoption, the percentage of adoption. So these AI services today, they are always optional in my mind. We haven't gone into a space where it's actually making addition. There are self-driving cars today. Even then, we have a lot of regulatory issues. So we haven't really crossed that hurdle yet. But today's, as at least in the foundation, we have these services are like augmenting, like helping people with, suggesting their decisions, not actually making decisions. From that angle, the first thing we want is we want to make sure the users trust these services. So if they're not trusting, they're not going to adopt it. If they're not adopting, it's not a successful implementation. So first thing in my mind is percentage of adoption.
Great. Sanjay?
So I'll give a slightly different angle on that is, and I feel it's a very measurable angle. Hopefully you can decide for yourself. It's about customer experience. So what is the definition of customer? It's a person or persons or entities who are working with a small business administration. So in what capacities do you work? Certification programs, a loan program. Those are the sort of 2 or 3 main things that you're working with. So what we are doing is we are deploying some model-based or algorithm-based decision support tools. And the purpose is to reduce the time it takes for us to do whatever that is. For example, if you are an 8A firm or a women's-owned small business firm or a small business category firm, you have to go through the certification process once, and then you have to do a recertification. And that's a fairly laborious, time-consuming process. So we're trying to apply some of these tools to say, can I reduce the time to allow to get you an answer to what you had applied for? And hopefully you can see the difference. So that's a metric, but not necessarily the metric. But if you think about it, the metric would be impact on our customers. Customers defined as people who work with the Small Business Administration. And so you can see a tangible impact to the service that you're receiving from our agency, and then you can decide for yourself if it is a positive impact to you, or hopefully it is, or not. But I think a time reduction and the amount of time you need for getting that certification or annual certification should be a significant impact to you.
Great. And Kurt?
Yep. So absolutely what Sanjay said. I guess my first comment, though, was really around, when it comes to AI, the private sector is going to really make all the advancements, the majority of the advancements in AI. If you just look back over the last decade or so, it's flip-flopped. A lot of advanced research was done in government. It's now mostly done in the private sector. But now, on to your question.
That's really why. Quickly, why? Why that flip?
Well, I think what happened though was that with my own personal opinion, and Sanjay will correct me for the record. It's really was, I think, as we got a modern web browser, and the internet really took off, and then all of a sudden it became e-commerce, and it became, just a $1 trillion, opportunity space for industry. And they started pouring money into that, and then research dollars followed that. And the government started scaling back because they didn't need to solve some of these advanced problems. The private sector was
because we can get it from private
in that
sector.
regard. To your question, though, I'm going to answer it in 2 ways. First one is adherence, or a focus or pay attention to the basics. And so from a cyber defender's perspective, it infuriates me when it comes to picking up, you name the company's annual threat report, and it says, that the adversary, used a known technique to get onto your network, and then they've spent anywhere between 200 and 250 days on your network before they're discovered on that. And so that tells me that we're not paying attention to the basics. And I was having a discussion with a colleague earlier around that, and it's like, is the government actually starting to fixate on that? And so this is really, I think, the value proposition for AI is if we could somehow cut down the noise and just focus on those key performance indicators, we can actually, from a government perspective, manage the networks better. The second one is really around the adoption angle, and I absolutely agree with that. from a government's perspective, you want to see that your policies have been adopted and you're measuring employee performance based off. I'm looking over here since you two are government employees. I'm not any longer. But the point is measuring that you're actually are being done. So I think there's the adoption piece will help that, and actually having the key measures for that. And so when it comes to cybersecurity, the best way to look at that is and I think there are key performance indicators within cybersecurity that can actually help you know. So, but focus on the basics. And I think if you do that, then we're far better off, and then we can use AI to actually reduce, some of that resource hit that you're going to take on that. But then the other one really is around adoption.
Great. And Robert, take us home on this topic.
So the question is success, right? So, I'm the odd man out. I'm the sales guy. So, success is getting sales. So,
That's a good one.
there's got to be that one guy. But, when you get to the bigger picture, though, I'm a storage guy. I sell storage. 90% of my conversations anymore are not about storage. It's just not what I talk about with them. I talk about what they're doing, what they're trying to end, with their actual success. And case in point, last week I was talking to somebody about AI. I have a customer, they're doing AI, they have an algorithm, it's deployed, and they're like, our algorithm's now 80% correct. 80% of the time they get an answer that is correct. And they're happy with that. That's a huge improvement for them, for what they're trying to predict. And they said their biggest problem, they're like, it's great, it works, it's already running on me, so there's not really anything for me to sell. But when I talk to them, I'm like, it's great that this is working, but what's your biggest problem? And the biggest problem is all the data is coming from someplace way overseas. They may get it every month, they may get it every 6 months. So while they have an 80% correct model, anytime they run the model, it really doesn't matter because the problem's probably either already happened or other things already getting fixed. So they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we get this so that it actually works someplace else? So, I just tell them, I was like, you can put your model on something like this, and it can be on somebody's belt or whatever, and you can just hook it up to what you're trying to model. It can give them an instant result of what they're looking for. The data can still be collected and sent back to home base so that they can do more analysis on it. And as they train their model and gets more accurate, they can deploy new models, or they can find new ways in which to use the data to come up with new things. And I think that's the real thing for me was, not that they're already a customer, but the mission that they're trying to accomplish is there. They see a way forward. They've had one little success. They got their success. They could do it. They know it's valid. Now, how do they go from there? And that's going to be the thing with AI that you'll find is you may go in and you may deploy something AI. The problem is if you deploy it today and you don't stay up with that and you don't help them keep training that model, 6 months from the time you deploy that model, it'll be invalid because technology changes. The cybersecurity threats change. The data that they're bringing in changes. And so your 80% model, if you let it stagnate, is going to be 70%, 6 months from the time you deploy it because you weren't keeping up with the changes that were there. So, I think that's the real key is just, it's going to be something you have to stay on. There's going to be little successes, but you're going to have a lot more successes by staying involved with it.
Great. So, I think what we're hearing about this part of our discussion is the need for collaboration between industry and government is high on this transformation. And everyone in this room can play a role in that to get this into government, help government achieve their mission around AI at all different levels. And, I might be wrong, but it seems like the need for collaboration is greater on this than past kind of transformational movements in technology and government. So I think there's an opportunity here for all of us to help government with their mission. We're a couple minutes left, not late, we'll be late in a few minutes. But wanted to end up with, instead of final thoughts, I'm going to call it knowledge nuggets. So if each one of you could just, what's one point you want our attendees walking away from today? What's the main thing from each of your perspectives you'd like them to walk away with?
I'm going to start saying, implementing AI, intelligence enabling, all this is cool, but do not forget your workforce. Take them along as you move, as you be part of this implementation. So if you're leaving them behind, you're going to fail on adoption. You're going to fail on something else. So take them and involve them very early in the life cycle as you start creating your AI services in your organization.
Great.
That's my 2 cents.
So I'd say in only 6 words: think big, start small, iterate rapidly. So set a vision of what you want to do. Start small, work with some partner. Collaboration is key here. And start learning from it. You learn from doing it, not from attending a session like this or reading a book or watching a video. So you learn the best by doing something. So do it and then learn from it and iterate rapidly.
Yep, so I would say, you know, that first of all, government will make advances in this, but you, and you know, to go back to your employers and tell them how much this nation needs AI. I mean, and you guys heard, you know, we're in a race, you know, with other countries around it, but you're the engine that's going to propel the advancement in AI. And so I really believe that that you need to, you know, go back to your employer and say how this is the value proposition we can provide to the customer, in this case the government, you know, in that regard. But I really believe it's going to start with you. The government will make some advancements, and there's those that 5% or so that actually will be a producer, but the rest of it's going to be consumer, and there's a huge need you know, for you to help.
Yeah, I think the small wins, quick successes are going to be important. I think taking things that are already out, spreading those across the spectrum of customers is going to help adoption quick. So instead of trying to come up with a new thing for everybody, if we can get things deployed that everybody can have success with, that'll help ensure that people continue adopting down the road. So.
Great. Panelists, fellow friends, thank you very much. We are out of time. Appreciate your time today. And enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.